So it's said that wisdom with the world is foolishness with God, and foolishness with God is wisdom with the world. And so the two are presented as mutually exclusive. You can either be wise in a worldly sense, in which case God sees you as a fool, or you can be wise in a godly sense, in which case the world sees you as a fool. And as Christians, we want to be wise in a godly sense. And so we feel as though we have to repress our worldly desires. We have to repress our worldly thoughts. But repression really isn't the answer here, because as you continue to add pressure, eventually things are going to burst and it's all going to come apart. And so I want to present an easier way. And that is, every step you move towards the east is one step away from the west, which is every step you move towards God is one step away from the world. So all you have to do is not repression, but to just increase your love for God. Because as you do that, you'll know a sweeter taste, right? And the world begins to taste flavorless in comparison. And so instead of repressing the world in an attempt to be less worldly, we should just increase our love for God. And there's actually a trick that's being played on us this whole time, because as we increase our love for God, as we grow in love for God, we don't begin to hate the world more. We don't begin to distance ourselves from the world more. Instead, quite the opposite. We begin to love the world more. And we see the world as shining with God's being. And so we can be in the world fully, and at the same time not of the world. Because as we become established in God, we become free of attachments to the world, our worldly desires, our thoughts. And so it's like going on holiday, you know? Going on holiday is enjoyable because you can go home at any time. And for us, living in the world, we get to enjoy the world, knowing that we can go back to God at any time. And so it also reminds me of this Buddhist saying that in the beginning the rivers are the rivers and the mountains are the mountains. Then the rivers are not the rivers and the mountains are not the mountains. And then in the end, the rivers are the rivers and the mountains are the mountains. I think what it's trying to say is that in the beginning we see the rivers and the mountains as having a separate and independent existence. And then as we grow in love for God, we see the rivers as no longer rivers and mountains as no longer mountains. But once we become established in God, we see the rivers as the rivers and the mountains are the mountains, except this time both the rivers and the mountains are shining with God's being as God's being. And so as we move towards God, the gap between God and the world closes. The world-God duality collapses. And so, in perfect love of God, we also love creation.